One of the things that is constantly online in relationship repair is this idea of avoidance. When talking about avoidant partners, you're not getting the full truth. So in today's video, I'm going to break down what's really going on underneath the surface. So in researching your relationship, oftentimes you can come across this phrase, avoidant. An avoidant partner is someone who is pulling away from you, is heading in the opposite direction, is avoiding intimate conversations, who doesn't want to talk about things, who refuses to talk about their feelings, etc. I understand what it can feel like trying to repair a relationship with a partner. The problem is that the truth behind labeling avoidant behavior as just an attachment style is actually going to leave you in a less powerful position when it comes to repairing a relationship. The harsh truth is that most people just really suck at cultivating a strong emotional environment for a relationship. So this may sound harsh, but hear me out, because this is going to help you to move your focus away from pathologizing your partner's behavior over to yourself, putting more control in your hands and taking ownership of the space that you create for the relationship. We live in an era where people use therapy speak in everyday life. This can be a really good thing because it helps people to understand their feelings and other people's feelings, but it can also cause massive gaps between people. This therapy speak, attachment styles and diagnoses and stuff, this can become an easy way to label someone as anxiously attached or dismissive avoidant, whatever it is. It can become easier to put a label on someone else than it is to admit that your energy, your reactions, and your communication style have a massive impact on the relationship environment. So the ultimate truth is that when a partner is avoiding opening up, it's because they've experienced enough evidence to know that opening up is likely to result in their nervous system being triggered. Whether it's through invalidation, through ignoring, through shouting, through over-explaining, through talking in logic, not emotions, there are many ways that they can feel invalidated in conversations. But the truth is, it's not just about one event. If you're trying to repair a relationship with a partner, it's usually about multiple events in very small ways that have compounded over time. This is how the human brain works. If the emotional environment within the relationship is at a very low standard, then it can be very difficult for them to feel confident having conversations that involve intimate feelings, sensitive emotions, and difficult conversations. Now, again, it's important to understand this so you don't trip over and make the mistakes that a lot of people do with relationship repair. So I'm going to talk about what to do with avoidant behaviors later on in the video, but just breaking down and understanding these mistakes that people make is going to help you to actually repair the emotional environment rather than destroy it more. So before you can fix the emotional environment, you have to dismantle the myths that you've fallen for along the way about why your relationship maybe feels distant right now. There's this common myth. The first myth is, if they loved me, then they would just open up. If they loved me, then they would just tell me their feelings. But the truth is that trust is built on feeling safe, not obligation. So opening up to someone who is reactive or critical or very invalidating, this isn't an act of love. It's setting yourself up to fail in a very low quality emotional environment. The other myth is this therapy speak that gets thrown around a lot. And again, I want to be clear that therapy is useful and a lot of these labels can help situations. But most of the time, this therapy speak and this labeling comes from unqualified people. When you label your partner as avoidant, it allows you to play the victim. And it frames them and their silence and them pulling away as a character flaw, while completely absolves you of any sort of impact on the emotional environment that we have as a partner. So these are the two biggest myths when it comes to this idea of avoidant behaviors, avoiding conversations, avoiding intimacy that people fall for. And what all this culminates in is you playing the prosecutor. You end up becoming the person who looks down on your partner because of their behaviors. So you approach emotional conversations kind of like a cross-examination. So you're feeling prepared to deal with someone who is avoidant or dismissive avoidant, whatever the label is, like you're there to cross-examine them. So it means that you aren't listening to understand. You are listening to build a case against them as an avoidant. Or you try and correct their memory of events, or you defend your own ego. And because this damages the emotional environment, this then starts to create more problems. So when you're approaching them in this way, as seeing them as an avoidant, it means that your partner starts to self-preserve more. So your partner doesn't withdraw because they're avoidant. They shut down because they've learned that sharing their internal world with you, their emotional world, triggers a penalty, whether it's anger, whether it's tears, lectures, invalidation, or interrogation. And it means that their emotions can freeze. And again, this isn't an avoidant trait, this is a human trait. So they stop talking about their emotions and conversations start to become superficial. And the moment topics start to shift towards deeper feelings, then your partner can start to climb up, start to shift the subject, or can even physically leave the room. So they end up feeling that like they're walking on eggshells. So there becomes a tension and it leads to a total collapse of authentic connection. And what this means is that the conversations become really inconsistent. And inconsistency is one of the most damaging things for any relationship. Trust is built on consistency. And if the emotional environment isn't consistent, then your partner is going to want to avoid participating in it. And this is important to understand. So when it comes to feeling like these avoidant traits are there as a character flaw, the reality is it's usually as a result of your ability to cultivate a strong emotional environment. So that kind of leaves the question, how do you cultivate a strong emotional environment when there are avoidant behaviors within the environment? In order to turn a sterile or even a toxic environment into a thriving one, you've got to understand the mechanics of building the emotional environment. The very first step is radical emotional intelligence. This is the foundation of building the emotional environment back. You cannot build a strong emotional environment if you're operating on your gut impulses and your reactivity. In order to build a very strong emotional environment, you need to cultivate radical emotional intelligence so that you can master the internal landscape of both of the minds in the relationship. This is yours and your partner's. So first, you need to master your own internal landscape. So emotional intelligence always starts with radical self-awareness. If you struggle when your partner speaks, if you struggle getting defensive, if you struggle hearing criticism, internally being able to deconstruct any emotional triggers you have. So if their silence or their criticism makes you panic, makes you worried, you've got to recognize that your urgency to fix it or to get defensive is a coping mechanism for your own anxiety. So it's really important to take ownership of that anxiety and process it yourself instead of projecting it onto your partner. But it also means developing this emotional intelligence towards your partner's feelings as well. So being able to decode your partner's true signal, what is actually being signaled to you rather than just the surface level defense mechanisms. So stopping reacting to this surface level defense mechanism and start reading the underlying emotion that your partner is feeling. So if you imagine their actions are suit of armor, so these avoidant behaviors that people talk about, looking past those defense mechanisms to see the emotion underneath. So if your partner is withdrawing, it's rarely an act of defiance. It's really against you. It's usually exhaustion or overwhelm or fear. So cultivating radical emotional intelligence means refusing to fight the silence and addressing the emotion underneath that caused that silence. And this is where validation is really important. So being able to validate your partner's feelings internally within yourself, being able to understand and accept their emotions are driving this behavior. They're not doing it as a slight against you. They're not doing it to attack you. So you don't have to agree with whatever words they use. It's not saying that whatever they're saying is logically accurate. It's saying it's emotionally accurate. And it stops you thinking about the logic behind it and looking at the driving behavior, which is the emotion. And this means implementing very high level management processes. So emotional control, self-control cannot rely on just raw willpower in the heat of the moment. You need to have some true operational systems to be able to handle emotional spikes within yourself. So cultivating strong emotional regulation before you engage in conversations is really important. And building this is exactly what I work on with members. Anyone can do something once. A lot of these changes are very easy to fake and your partner knows that. So when you're trying to repair a relationship, this is where learning the right emotional tools is going to help you with your communication. It's never just about what you say, it's about how you say it. And that's the stuff that can't be faked. Now, obviously I can't dig fully into this here, but if you do want to take that next step and you want to start your journey then join my relationship bootcamp. This is where all of my members start making the immediate steps to start turning their relationships around and repairing the relationships from the ground up. All you have to do is click on the link in the description if you want to grab your spot. But the next step is to make sure that you are rewarding vulnerability. So this is on top of the foundation. This is now the standard. So this is about positive reinforcement. So if your partner is acting with what people call avoidant behaviors, rather than punishing those behaviors, it's about doing the inverse of that, which is rewarding vulnerability. So every time your partner does open up, they ultimately are taking an emotional risk. When you're cultivating the emotional environment and it's at a low standard, every time they open their mouth with any sort of emotions, it feels like a massive risk for them. So if that risk doesn't pay off, they're going to stop taking it. So when your partner does share something vulnerable and raw, reward it. Rather than shooting it down, invalidating it, ask more questions. Tell me more about that. Think about the last time your partner shared something really raw, really vulnerable, and something really scary for them. What did you do? How did you respond to it? Did you use it against them in a later argument? Did you offer unsolicited advice instead of just listening? Did you make it about yourself? You essentially gave a micro punishment for them sharing their feelings. So being able to do the inverse of that is really important. This is rewarding the vulnerability. So to build the emotional environment, vulnerability needs to be met with validation. So even something as simple as, thank you so much for telling me that. I know that it wasn't easy to say. I know that I've responded really badly in the past to these kinds of things. So I'm really glad that you shared that. Being able to validate in a very deep way is going to really help to undo any of these avoidant behaviors, because it means that you're rewarding the response that is positive, that is healthy, and that is helpful, rather than punishing the response that you don't like. But the third step is making sure that you're transitioning away from you to we. So this is changing the language that you use. The words that you use in your communication will either build a bridge or put up a wall. Strong emotional environments are built on collaboration. A lot of people complain about this and saying, well, my partner's stonewalling, my partner is pushing back, my partner is criticizing. I've actually done a lot of videos on this, but even if it feels like your partner is not collaborating with you right now, still building that collaborative environment is really important. So collaboration is building an understanding, but from a teamwork perspective. A lot of people can give interrogative questions, asking, why do you always shut down? But this sounds like an accusation, and it forces a defensive kind of posture. But if you are speaking in slightly different words, like what and how questions, this allows you to shift your phrasing to more of an invitation to join the collaboration. For example, what can I do to make this easier to talk about? Should I just listen right now? Or do you want me to give my opinion? What is better for you? Or, for example, how do you think we can approach this problem so that you can feel a little bit more heard? In this way, you're inviting collaboration without pressurizing your partner to speak their feelings, without guilt-tripping them into speaking their feelings. You're rewarding behavior that is helpful to the situation. But most of all is building a consistent environment over an intense one. So a lot of people see this as the boring step, but this is one of the most important steps, because when people think about relationships, they think about passion and fire and all of this kind of intensity, but a strong emotional environment is not built during one single 4-hour deep talk. It's built in the small micro moments of boring daily life. So this is not just about the things that you say, it's about the way that you respond, the way that you interact with your partner. So this is about being reliable and responsive. So a good question to ask yourself is, can your partner predict how you will react? Are you warm one moment and cold the next moment? If so, then that means the environment for them is unpredictable. And this unpredictability breeds avoidance behaviors. Again, this is not about a character trait. This is about an environment that is breeding these behaviors, both within yourself and your partner. So this is why it's really important to make sure that you're leading by example. And this predictability means honoring the space. If your partner genuinely needs space to process, allow them to have that space, but make sure that you're being very clear about it. So for example, I can totally get that you need some time to process your feelings, and I completely get that. Would you feel more comfortable maybe having this conversation at a later date? Maybe like next week? In this way, you're acknowledging the environment, but you're also not dropping the subject. You're allowing this conversation to be deferred until maybe another time that your partner feels a little bit more regulated and allows them to have a bit more processing time for their feelings. And this prevents the space from feeling like abandonment from your side as well. But most of all, the top of the pyramid here is making sure that you're not avoiding conflict. Now, this doesn't mean that you need to fight, but it's important to still have these conversations, but doing it from a very extremely regulated, high standard place. I've spoken a lot about this. I've done a deeper dive video on this, which I'll link to on the screen and in this description down below. But making sure that you are able to approach conversations and conflict from a place of collaboration, making sure that these conversations are productive for both of you, but paced out in a way that makes sense for both of your emotions. It's never about not having these conversations because you are scared of triggering your partner. It's allowing your partner to feel triggered, showing them the evidence that the conversations are not going to go the way they expected them to go. Like I said, I won't dig into it here. I'll leave you with that deeper dive video, and I'll see you over there.